Million borrowers. The SAVE plan allowed borrowers to pay back their debts in smaller payments based on their income and family size. Education Secretary Linda McMahon says the program would have cost taxpayers more than $342 billion over 10 years. Now, borrowers who were enrolled in the SAVE program will have a limited time to pick a new repayment plan.
If I told you that millions of Americans could wake up one morning and find out their student loan relief has vanished overnight, would you believe it? And if I told you that this isn't just a rumor or political fear-mongering, but a real possibility being discussed inside Washington right now, would that concern you? Because tonight, we're taking you inside one of the biggest financial shocks heading straight towards 7 million student loan borrowers across the United States. And the question is simple. What happens if the Trump administration officially moves to end President Biden's SAVE repayment plan? Many Americans watching right now depend on SAVE. It lowered monthly payments. It protected low-income borrowers. It prevented interest from ballooning out of control. It was marketed as one of the most affordable repayment plans ever introduced. But tonight, as political winds shift and the White House undergoes a complete policy recalibration, millions are now bracing for what could be the largest disruption to student loan repayment in more than 20 years. Let's break down what this actually means, not with political spin, not with campaign rhetoric, but in simple, direct terms that impact families, workers, young graduates, and anyone trying to climb out of debt. Because the decisions being discussed behind closed doors don't just affect borrowers, they affect the entire economy. They affect consumer spending, housing, credit markets, and even the job choices people make. So let me ask you, watching right now, if the SAVE plan disappears tomorrow, how would it affect your life? Would your payments double? Triple? Would you be forced to delay buying a home, pause retirement savings, put off starting a family? And do you think the government understands the pressure that borrowers are already under? The SAVE program wasn't just another repayment plan. It was specifically designed to cap monthly payments based on income, not on rising interest. For many borrowers, monthly bills dropped from hundreds of dollars to just a few dollars, sometimes even zero. That's not a small adjustment. That's the difference between affording groceries or skipping meals, between surviving paycheck to paycheck or finally breathing again. And now the possibility of that relief ending has created a wave of anxiety across campuses, workplaces, and households nationwide. Inside Washington, the Trump administration has repeatedly signaled that it intends to reverse key Biden-era economic policies. Student loan reform is near the top of that list. The SAVE plan is being scrutinized as too generous, too costly, and unfair to taxpayers. Those are the exact words coming from senior administration voices. But here's what borrowers want to know. What's the alternative? Is there a replacement plan? Or do millions simply get thrown back into the old system, a system that critics say created the crisis in the first place? Let's walk through what could realistically happen next, because whether you support Trump, Biden, or neither, every American deserves clarity, and borrowers deserve to understand the consequences before policies change. If SAVE ends, borrowers could be pushed back into older repayment structures, ones that calculate payments differently and allow interest to accumulate rapidly. Under the old rules, if you couldn't afford your monthly payment, your balance didn't just stay the same, it grew. For many Americans, that meant paying for 10 years and ending up owing more than when they started. Some borrowers called it financial quicksand, and others described it as a lifetime of debt for a degree I already earned. So if SAVE is taken away, that quicksand could return. Right now, millions want answers. Will payments jump immediately? Will interest capitalization resume? Will low-income borrowers lose their $0 payment protections? Will forgiveness timelines be altered? And here's a bigger question. Is this shift already decided behind the scenes, or is there still room for public influence? If you're watching this, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Should SAVE continue? Should it be replaced? Or should the government rethink the entire student loan system altogether? Americans across all demographics are weighing in. Some argue that SAVE burdens taxpayers, while others insist it is essential for economic mobility. But behind these debates are real people: nurses, teachers, veterans, single parents, first-generation college graduates, all of whom are now wondering if the promise of affordable repayment was temporary. So what exactly is the Trump team planning? According to early reports, the administration is exploring aggressive rollbacks to income-driven repayment programs, with SAVE positioned as the first target. Advisors close to the decision say they believe Biden overreached with broad relief policies and that repayment must be restored to traditional standards. But what does traditional actually mean? Higher payments, more interest, stricter rules, less flexibility. And while some believe that's necessary, others warn it could spark a financial shock on millions of households already struggling with inflation, housing costs, and stagnant wages. Let's shift the focus to the borrowers, the real people behind the numbers. Imagine a 26-year-old teacher in Ohio who joined SAVE to keep her payments manageable while earning an entry-level salary. Imagine a veteran in Texas using SAVE to avoid delinquency during a career transition. Imagine a single mother in California whose payments dropped from $165 to $22 a month under SAVE. For them, this isn't politics, it's survival. So how do we weigh the economic arguments against the human impact? And here's a question for everyone watching. Should student loan repayment be standardized, or should it adapt to the economic realities borrowers face? Should debt relief be temporary or permanent? Comment your thoughts, because this conversation affects the country's financial future more than many people realize. Now, let's zoom out and take a look at the broader landscape. The U.S. economy is at a crossroads. Inflation is cooled in some sectors but remains stubborn in others. Housing affordability is at the worst point in decades. Credit card debt nationwide is at an all-time high, and millions of Americans have less than $500 in savings. In this environment, removing SAVE could have ripple effects far beyond student loan accounts. Consumer spending could tighten, delinquencies could rise, younger Americans could pull back on major life decisions like homeownership. And if that happens, markets react, industries react, entire communities feel the impact. This is why so many economists are urging caution. They warn that dismantling relief programs too abruptly could weaken financial stability for millions of households. But supporters of the rollback argue that the government cannot sustain what they call expensive forgiveness pipelines. They want stricter repayment, faster recoupment of loan dollars, and less federal spending on debt relief. It's a clash of ideologies, economics, and political promises. But borrowers are asking one simple question: what should they prepare for? If SAVE ends, many could see their payments recalculated in a matter of months. Interest that has been paused from growing may start compounding again. Administrative confusion could lead to errors, miscalculations, or billing delays, something we've already seen in past transitions. And the stress of navigating new repayment plans could increase financial strain on millions who are already stretched thin. So let me ask you again, what does this mean for you? Are you enrolled in SAVE? Are you worried about your payments increasing? Do you feel that the government should maintain some version of the program? And what changes, if any, do you think are fair? Your perspective matters, especially at a time when public opinion can influence political decisions. As this story unfolds, remember that this is only the beginning. Policy experts expect months of debate, legal battles, pushback from advocacy groups, and intense media coverage. Borrowers may mobilize, lawmakers may introduce counterproposals, the courts may become involved, and the national conversation about student debt, a conversation that has lasted for years, is about to enter one of its most unpredictable chapters. In the next segment, we'll explore what policy analysts believe could replace SAVE if the program is eliminated, how the Trump administration plans to restructure federal repayment options, and what strategies borrowers can use right now to protect themselves before any major changes take place. There are rumors of new repayment models, new eligibility rules, and a completely redesigned system based on ability to pay rather than income percentages. We'll break down what's realistic, what's speculation, and what you should be watching closely.
Pause for a moment and really think about this. What happens to a country when millions of people suddenly face higher debt payments at the exact same time? What happens to families, to renters, to new graduates, to workers who are already stretched thin? Because tonight, in Part 2, we're going deeper into the potential end of President Biden's SAVE plan and what the Trump administration may place on the table as a replacement. And let me tell you right now, the options are far more complicated than most Americans realize. Across Washington, committees, advisors, budget analysts, and political strategists are sketching out scenarios, some public, some very much behind the scenes. SAVE wasn't just a program, it was a symbol of the Biden administration's attempt to reshape federal student loan repayment. Ending it won't just be a policy change, it will be a psychological shock. Borrowers who finally felt a small sense of relief may soon feel like the rug is being pulled out from under them. And the question that millions are now asking, what comes next? Let's explore that. Because if you think the removal of SAVE is the end of the conversation, it's actually the beginning of a much larger political and economic battle. One possibility being circulated within policy circles is the return to older income-driven plans with stricter calculations, fewer protections, and higher minimum payments. For many borrowers, that means going back to a system that penalized those with lower incomes, those in service jobs, and those whose degrees didn't lead to high-paying careers right away. Under those older structures, your interest grew even when you made monthly payments. Many borrowers described it as paying rent on debt, temporary relief without ever seeing the principal go down. Imagine paying for 10 years and barely reducing the balance. Imagine never feeling progress, no matter how hard you worked. This is the reality many Americans fear returning to if SAVE is removed without a proper replacement. But here's the twist. The Trump administration may not simply revert to the old system. Advisors close to the process have suggested that Trump wants something simpler, tougher, and more financially responsible. The question is, simpler for whom, tougher for whom, and financially responsible according to whose definition? Some experts predict a brand new repayment model, one where payments are tied to a percentage of income, but with stricter caps, fewer forgiveness options, and tighter eligibility rules. Others believe the administration may push for a fixed payment model that places borrowers into standardized monthly obligations regardless of their economic realities. But here's the real concern experts keep raising. Will these changes address the root problem, or will they recreate the same cycle of debt that borrowers have been trapped in for decades? Let me ask you, watching right now, if you had the power to redesign the student loan system from scratch, what would you change? Would you remove interest entirely? Would you allow bankruptcy options? Would you cap tuition? Would you expand forgiveness? Your perspective isn't just a reaction. It's part of a national conversation that shapes policy debates. And trust me, Washington pays attention when public pressure grows. Now, let's examine another possible outcome, a legal showdown. The SAVE plan already faced lawsuits, protests, and ideological pushback. If the Trump administration moves to eliminate it, advocacy groups and state attorneys general could challenge the decision in court. That means injunctions, delays, appeals, a process that could stretch on for months, maybe years. And during that time, borrowers could be stuck in limbo, not knowing which plan they're actually enrolled in or what rules apply. Uncertainty becomes the new reality. Millions of Americans will wake up each morning checking their loan servicer accounts, wondering whether payments changed again. They'll call customer service lines that are already overwhelmed, and they'll ask the same question thousands of others are asking at the exact same moment. What am I supposed to do now? This confusion isn't hypothetical. It already happened during the restart of student loan payments after the pandemic pause. Millions received incorrect billing amounts. Others were placed in the wrong repayment plans. Some faced delinquency due to administrative errors. Now, imagine that chaos multiplied by the dismantling of SAVE. But beyond policy, let's talk about the emotional impact. Debt isn't just numbers on a screen. It carries weight. It affects mental health, confidence, career choices, and long-term planning. Borrowers with high levels of debt often delay having children, buying homes, or investing in their future. They feel stuck, like no matter how hard they worked, the finish line keeps moving further away. SAVE gave many of these people a small sense of hope. The possibility of losing that hope so abruptly creates anxiety that extends far beyond finances. The Trump administration argues that dramatic changes are necessary to restore fiscal balance and prevent long-term government overspending. They say SAVE is unsustainable, too generous, and places an unfair burden on taxpayers who did not attend college. These arguments resonate with a large portion of Americans who feel left out of the system, people who worked trades, skipped college, or paid off their loans decades ago. They ask, why should we subsidize others? It's a real sentiment, a real frustration, and a politically powerful one. But on the other side are millions who say education should never become a lifelong financial trap. They argue that economic mobility depends on affordable access to college, and that punishing borrowers in the name of fiscal responsibility is unfair and short-sighted. They say we didn't borrow to become wealthy, we borrowed to join the workforce, and they fear that ending SAVE will push an entire generation backward. And this leads us to a bigger national debate. What role should education play in America's economic future? Should the federal government treat student loans like a business or like an investment in the nation's workforce? Should repayment programs be strict and revenue-focused, or should they adapt to modern economic challenges? These aren't small questions. They strike at the heart of how America values education, opportunity, and fairness. If SAVE disappears, borrowers will have tough decisions to make. Should they switch repayment plans immediately? Should they refinance privately? Should they prepare for higher monthly payments? Should they change career plans? These are personal, life-altering questions, and millions may be forced to answer them whether they're ready or not. We also need to consider how schools themselves might react. Universities could face increased pressure to justify tuition costs. Enrollment patterns may shift. Students may choose cheaper degrees. Parents may discourage their children from attending expensive programs. The ripple effect doesn't just stop at borrowers. It moves through institutions, industries, communities, and eventually the entire economy. Now, imagine this scenario. The SAVE plan officially ends, borrowers are moved into a stricter plan, and payment amounts jump nationwide. What happens next? Economists warn that consumer spending, which makes up nearly 70% of the U.S. economy, could contract. When millions suddenly owe more every month, they cut back immediately. Fewer retail purchases, fewer restaurant visits, less travel, less investment. And once consumer activity slows, businesses feel the impact. Hiring freezes, layoffs, reduced growth. A change in student loan policy can spark shockwaves far beyond the education sector. And here's something many Americans don't know. Student loan defaults don't just harm borrowers, they harm the federal budget. When borrowers can't pay, taxpayers eventually absorb the cost. So the question becomes, does ending SAVE reduce taxpayer burden, or does it increase long-term financial risk by pushing more borrowers into default? That's a debate economists are fiercely divided on. As we move through this unfolding story, the nation finds itself split between two visions of student debt. One vision says relief is essential, not optional. The other says relief is irresponsible, even unfair. But regardless of political views, one reality remains. 7 million Americans enrolled in SAVE are waiting, uncertain, anxious, and watching Washington closely. They want clarity, they want answers, and they want a system that doesn't change with every election cycle. And so, let me ask you directly, if you were advising policymakers right now, what would you tell them? Should SAVE stay? Should it be replaced? Should repayment be easier or tougher? Should interest continue to exist at all? Your voice matters, and your perspective shapes the national debate unfolding in real time. In the next segment, Part 3, we're going to take you into the future, exploring the long-term consequences if SAVE ends permanently, how experts expect the repayment landscape to evolve over the next decade, and what borrowers can do right now to protect themselves, their finances, and their mental well-being. We'll also break down the political strategies driving these decisions, the economic stakes behind the scenes, and the path this issue may take as we move toward the next election cycle. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your fears, your frustrations, your hopes. Are you expecting SAVE to end? Are you preparing for higher payments? Are you worried about the impact on your family? This story is not just about policy, it's about people, and the final chapter is still being written.